Right here on the Talk to Me station, AM 1300 WMEL, sponsored by AVET Project. Glenn, we're having a great discussion here with Shelly Campbell from the Community Legal Services of Mid-Florida. Wouldn't you say?
I'd say that excellent discussion. So happy that you could come and be with us today, Shelly. And want to remind people you can call in at 631-1300. That's 631-1300 if you've got some questions for Shelly or us, either one.
Shelly, we were talking before we went to the break about this well-grounded business. Give us that, define that real quickly again.
Sure. Basically, it's a three-part test. You have to have an in-service injury or occurrence. You have to have a current disability, and then you have to have a link, a medical link that's basically going to link whatever happened to you when you were on active duty to the current disability that you're suffering from now. The easiest thing for the current disability is to have medical records showing a diagnosis, but you can actually just be having the symptoms, and you can try to establish it that way.
Okay, so that's the well-grounded process, and that's the baseline for establishing
Right.
a claim. Now, who all can come to you for your services? Can somebody that's employed making 75 grand a year come in to your office and get served?
Unfortunately not, because we are a 501c3 and a nonprofit. We are basically, we assist low-income individuals and families.
So you have a means test that they'd have to fill out?
Exactly. Usually it's about 125% of poverty. Honestly, right now, most people are eligible if they're on unemployment or if they're working part-time, or we have some people that work full-time, but with a household of 2 adults and 3 kids, their percentage of poverty increases dramatically. So the eligibility is there. There is a means test, but usually we can get people qualified unless they're making a substantial income.
And at the county, it's a different matter.
Yeah, there's no means test at the county. We don't care if you're independently wealthy or in poverty.
Everybody gets it free.
Everybody gets it for free. And, like Shelly was saying, they've been corners as much as they can to get people eligible for their services. And I noticed that either I didn't hear it or we're being remiss here. How do they contact you for assistance, Shelly?
They can contact me directly. My phone number is 386-255-6573. My direct extension is 2441. The process basically would be someone would call in and leave a voicemail because I don't answer my phone every time it rings. But
you'd be doing nothing but answering
exactly.
your phone.
And then we do a very quick intake, get financial information, and once that's established, then we can move forward. I also wanted to touch on, I do focus on compensation and discharge upgrades and things of that nature. However, I kind of serve as a gatekeeper. All the veterans call in directly to me, and then I maneuver them through the system to get them assistance and advice with everything from family law to foreclosure to landlord-tenant to bankruptcy. So we really are a full-service law firm.
So you're telling me if a warrior is come back from deployment and for whatever reason he and his wife are no longer going to be married, they could contact you and you could help them with that too?
Absolutely. The way that we basically streamline the process so that it takes out the frustration of working through a bureaucracy. Most of our clients have to call in and they have a very difficult time getting through. So we created this special line so that they can contact me directly and then I can help them maneuver through the system. We see a lot of young veterans with family law issues. So
more and more, would you say there's an increase in this happening?
Absolutely. Family
Maybe
law,
it might have something to do with all these multiple deployments and the fact that they're not spending any time together?
Absolutely. And most of the time there are young children involved. The ages range, goodness, from 20 to 35, but definitely a lot of young veterans with family law issues. And we have really saw a lot of foreclosures, which is really sad. Somebody comes back from deployment and they're home, and it's unbelievable to think that they have to deal with their home being taken from them.
Well, I'm particularly excited about that because we get more phone calls than we would like concerning foreclosure actions involving veterans, and it's not always a VA loan that's involved. It's a non-VA loan, and I'll be perfectly honest. We are expert at everything in the world except maybe real estate and education benefits. So having a referral source like that is truly great. And I noticed you have a website. Could they do any of this registration or anything through that?
Absolutely. We have an online intake. If they go to clsmf.org, it stands for Community Legal Services of Mid-Florida, and there's a link on our page that will take you to the online application. You fill it out, and then the next day somebody from our office will contact them.
Excellent. Well, again, folks, that's www.clsmf.org.
You mentioned also that you help or assist with discharge upgrades. We're hearing a lot about these warriors. Again, multiple tours. They're over there in the mix. They may or may not have a mental health issue with the post-traumatic stress disorder because they're being subjected to things that are way outside the realm of normal human experience. And especially over long periods of time, that level of stress will lead to this mental problem called PTSD or post-traumatic stress. They come back here and maybe they're getting Article 15s because they did something stupid or they barked off to their NCOIC or something happened and they're having a stripe taken away or something like this, and maybe they get discharged. And maybe they have a great number of years that are good, honest, patriotic service to their country, and they've got a series of Article 15s or punishment that's resulted in them being discharged with less than an honorable discharge. How do you approach that?
Um, I see it a lot. Um, I see veterans that have 8, 9 years of service. I think that's the highest that I've saw from returning Iraq or Afghanistan vets. And just like you said, that's exactly what happens. A couple deployments, a few deployments, and then they come back to the country. Usually, it's a misconduct issue. I see drug abuse, alcohol abuse, something like that, which could absolutely be stemming from a PTSD or a traumatic brain injury, or as we discussed, your home being foreclosed, or your wife leaving, or whatever it may be. And basically, what we can do is we can request an upgrade. There are regulations out now that require, if someone is discharged with an other than honorable, and the basis of the action from the active duty member is based on something that's stemming from PTSD or traumatic brain injury, that they have to be upgraded. And so we're trying to find those cases. I would encourage anyone that's listening, if they have an other than honorable for a misconduct, to please contact me.
If they have the requisite combat experience
Exactly.
or stress or PTSD or what have TBI, traumatic brain injury, everybody.
Right, right.
I'm just wondering, we've been talking about the more current warriors from the Gulf War on up to now, and do you offer your services for any veteran, World War II, Korea, Vietnam?
Good point, Glenn.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
absolutely. We see a lot of Vietnam era vets. Probably the majority of my caseload are Vietnam era vets, and then down from there. I have had a couple World War II vets, which was very nice for me.
Well, I want to put a shout out to Henry if you're listening, because he and I had a conversation after he had listened to American Warrior Radio for the first or second time last week, called into the station. We invite everybody's comments, so we're interested in what you think of the program. And Henry, if you're out there listening, that could be you too, because you could file a claim. There is no cutoff or delimiting date for filing a service-connected claim for compensation with the VA, so long as you've got that well-grounded claim, right?
Right.
And
Exactly.
Henry's 90 years old, living on Merritt Island. He could still qualify as long as he puts the evidence together.
Absolutely. And, I would encourage him to do that, because if any of those service-connected disabilities were to play any part in, let's just say, if a veteran passes away and something is causing that and that's service-connected, then that benefit could be carried on. So.
And what's that program called, Glenn? The DIC?
Oh yes, dependents indemnity compensation, and a whole long subject for itself. But it basically is a benefit paid to the surviving spouse of a veteran who the VA determines died from a service-connected cause. And you need to know that it's important to note that you don't have to be service-connected at the time of death for it to be ruled as a service-connected death. These presumptives are great example of that, like a new presumptive for people exposed to Agent Orange is ischemic heart disease. And if a veteran were to die from ischemic heart disease or any kind of heart problems that are listed on the death certificate, then the spouse could apply and would be approved for dependents indemnity compensation, even though that veteran had never applied or got any compensation from the VA for that disability.
And that brings up a good point. In your office and in your practice, do you serve the dependents of veterans as well? If a woman came to you and said, "My husband passed away, I think he was getting a check from the VA," or whatever the circumstances are, you'd be able to help her also?
Yes. Yes, we can help spouses. We help children. We get a lot of children that call in because the veteran is elderly and they're trying to establish whether it be aid and attendance benefits or further benefits basically from the VA that provide financial assistance for, say, assisted living facilities and things like that. So absolutely.
Well, folks, we were expecting a frontline phone call from a warrior over in Afghanistan. We're still waiting for that. If he does chime in, again, it's all subject to whether he gets called to duty, and it's time's kind of winding down. But I'm enjoying this conversation with Shelly and my good co-host, always Glenn. So we're just going to continue rolling with this because really, this is the nuts and bolts of what it takes to get the VA acting on your part. And on either side of me right now, I've got two great advocates for veterans. So let's keep the ball rolling. You talked about the fact that I guess the same situation would apply if a spouse came in and said, "My husband passed away." She'd have to go through the means test type of thing too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, she would have to go through the means test as well. Usually, if someone's on Social Security or a fixed income,
they're going to qualify?
Absolutely.
Okay. And you talked about appeal representation, and Glenn, his office does everything from the initial claim to the NOD to representing beyond that. Same with you. You could take a case literally from the get-go, a plain sheet of paper introducing an initial claim, all the way through to the Court of Appeals.
Yes.
When did you get your certification through the Court of Appeals? I'm just curious.
In October of 2009.
Well, congratulations, because that's an accomplishment too.
Thank you.
Not a whole lot of attorneys in this country. A lot of attorneys, not many that are authorized to practice and represent before the court.
That's true.
It's very true, and for the veterans, I think it's kind of special to have that court because it is a federal court, and it's a very important court. The frustrating part about the court process is that, as we discussed, it's usually a remand, which means they're sending it back to the board level, and it just. I don't know if you've ever heard it referred to as the hamster wheel, but it just these claims just take so long to process sometimes, and we all do what we can as advocates to speed that up, but it's a frustrating process for the veterans, so we really want to help out in any way that we can.
And also, do you refer people for help across the United States out of the Central Florida area?
Yes, we certainly do. We try to give substantive referrals. I really have a hard time just giving someone a referral and not knowing anything about the organization that we're sending them to, mainly for the reason that they've already been pushed around and they've already been trying to battle these bureaucracies, and it just doesn't seem right. So we really, my legal assistant and I put in time and do the research. And there are a couple national organizations that will try to find legal representation for veterans throughout the country. So we try to touch base with them and then local legal aids.
And we have personal experience through your office on that matter because you've helped warriors out in California, a couple up in North Carolina, one in Tennessee. And as you mentioned, AVET project is never going to put some information towards somebody that isn't tangible, doesn't have some meat. We're not going to just say, "Oh, try this number," or something like that. You mentioned it. You were eloquent in that that they've been pushed around and had all the trouble that they can handle already.
Right.
Somebody needs to step up and actually give them the nuts and bolts and what they need, and as you said, some substantive information. And we appreciate that, honestly, because if we put AVET Project's name behind it, we want it to be solid.
Right.
And we really appreciate the support that you give. What are some of the other things that you can do? We talked about the Veterans Court, and I want to touch on that subject for a moment because, again, we're talking about these multiple tours leading to post-traumatic stress and family problems and that traumatic brain injury. What is that, Glenn?
Traumatic brain injury, I guess probably the easiest example is one that most people will be familiar with, and that's when unfortunately our warriors get impacted by an improvised explosive device, IED. You know, they can be riding in a vehicle and have the vehicle, I've seen them flipped all the way up in the air and do a backflip. And somehow our warriors survived this, but you know, you got your delicate little brain encased in this hard shell called your skull, and when it gets rattled around in there, there's problems. And sometimes those problems don't show up for a little bit.
Sure, the concussive blast leads to concussions.
Exactly.
And even on the battlefield, and listeners know from past episodes, we've talked about the MRAPs, these mine-resistant vehicles that are supposed to deflect the blast outwards. The vehicle may survive the explosion quite well, and yet the inhabitants of the vehicle can have compression fractures and this TBI, which they're calling the signature wound of the war, PTSD and TBI. You look at the person, they look perfectly normal, don't have any wounds on the outside, and yet inside it can be a mess. And so with the TBI and those type of injuries, they come back and they need to get reintegrated. They have to have jobs. We know that situation isn't coming through. All the laws on the books don't matter if the practical application is they come back and their employer's moved on or filled the position or whatever, so they're left holding the bag, and then they start self-medicating, maybe getting angry with their wife or spouse or something. They get into trouble with the court system. So what can you tell us about your involvement? I know this is kind of the genesis of the Veterans Court movement. We're hoping to really push that. I know Glenn's involved. I am, AVET Project. Have you touched upon that? Are you familiar with that program?
Yes, I am very familiar, and I, too, would love to be a part of a movement to have these courts established throughout Florida and throughout the nation. It's a huge problem. You have veterans coming back, and they're getting into the criminal justice system for whatever reason. A lot of it is acting out upon symptoms, frustration, not understanding what they're going through, and then they end up in the system, and we know what happens when people end up in the court system. Unfortunately, it becomes a cycle, through probation and everything else, it's really a drain, honestly. So through the Veterans Court, what they're able to do is have an advocate there from the VA who provides an avenue for this veteran to receive treatment, to receive counseling, whatever it is that they need, in exchange for having adjudication withheld, which basically just means that, not that the charge is dropped, but that there's no adjudication, there's no guilt, no finding of guilt.
So like a diversion agreement type situation.
Absolutely. A lot, very similar to our drug courts that we have here in the country, but focused on veterans specifically. And they've been very successful. I know that there's one in the Panhandle in Florida, in Fort Walton Beach. I'm not sure if there are any in Central Florida yet.
Well, there's Palm Beach County has one, and we hopefully will have one up and running in the January-February time frame here in Brevard County. So
that's wonderful.
And Judge Murphy here locally is at the forefront of putting the Central Florida's Veterans Court initiative together. I know there's ongoing meetings at least once a month, and AVET Project is involved, as well as I know Glenn's office and several others. But it's going to take a concerted effort by everybody coming together and actually wanting to tackle this problem. And the district attorneys are going to have to sign on to it. The judges are going to have to recognize it and want to propel it forward. But the general idea is those guys and gals that come back with these war injuries, particularly the mental health injuries, the PTSD and TBI, get into trouble. We prevent them from going through like you said, the horrors of the regular system. Give them a little special consideration, since literally, let's get to the heart of it. Right. We sent them over there to fight, to kill, to protect. They come back, their minds or brains may be scrambled. They're not acting as they would even before they entered service. So we kind of owe it to them, don't we?
Absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, it's it's really a frustrating thing to see someone being charged for actions that they may not even understand why they're acting that way. Or, it's really, really frustrating. And I think that it creates a lot of issues. I mean, just with VA benefits, if there's a warrant out and there's a warrant issued, your benefits, if they don't stop at that point, you're going to have an overpayment. So then you're going to have to fight an overpayment and to get them reestablished. And so it creates
snowballs.
Absolutely.
We have had on past American Warrior episodes Marty Gonzalez, who's at the forefront of the effort in Houston, Texas, establishing Veterans Court. And I know they've had some really wonderful success out there, and it really does. It has to catch fire. So if you're listening to the American Warrior Radio online in Washington State or Maine, no matter where you are, please get involved. Contact, whether it's your county commissioner, your local congressman, whoever is in a position of authority, even a judge. You can write letters to your judges and ask that they give some special consideration to our military members and war veterans, particularly those that have been in combat, so that we keep them out of the general population of offenders, I guess. I mean, they're not going to, as you mentioned, this isn't going to go away. Whatever they did is still on the books. It's a matter of how we deal with it and how we approach the correction of it.
Exactly. The rehabilitation and the treatment is really what we're looking here for the veterans. Sometimes punishment is not necessarily the best way to deal with it.
Yeah, and I'm seeing or hopeful that this will lead to veterans who unfortunately get into the situation where they need to go to the Veterans Court to get the help they may not seek otherwise, and have a positive outcome rather than, as you said earlier, the negative outcome of the cycle of going to jail and then just seems to circle back around and circle back around. Nothing's being done to fix the root cause of the problem.
And that's got to be the fact that we are wringing out our active duty and National Guard and Reserve forces. You've all heard Glenn and I talk, along with other guests we've had on, about how much we're asking of our military members nowadays. Never before in this country's history have we required that a military member perform more than one combat tour. And here it is very commonplace. We say multiple tours like it's, that's just language or semantics. No, this is depriving their family and their children of the mom or dad that should be integral to their family, especially the National Guard and Reserves. I mean, we know our active duty signed on, and they're obligated to go there and fight for 24/7, 365. But our weekend warriors, our citizen warriors, didn't sign up for this. They signed up for a strategic force. In other words, at last, if we absolutely need them, we'll call them. Well, that's now an operational force, and we see it right here in the neighborhood. Get acquainted with what's going on in your local neighborhood. See if there's a National Guard armory or reserve post, and ask them if there's anything that you can do to help them, because these families are really struggling. High unemployment. They're dealing with the issues we're talking about today, needing to file claims, not having the wherewithal or the information to even get engaged. So we appreciate you listening to American Warrior Radio, and we want you to spread this information out to those that you know that have been in the military or that are currently serving, or maybe it's a widow. She may not even know that she has a benefit that's available to her. So again, Shelly, I really appreciate you being here. Can you share again with the audience how they can get in touch with you?
They can call me directly at my office. The number is 386-255-6573, and the extension is 2441. Or they can get online at www.clsmf.org, and they can do an online intake there. Also, if you just put Veterans Legal Advocacy Project in Google, it'll come right up for you. We are on Facebook. You can find us on Facebook. And I just encourage anyone that is listening and that has a legal issue to just contact us, and we'll see what we can do. If we can't help, like we said, we certainly try to provide a very sound referral.
And that goes for anybody listening anywhere, because I know that Shelly has provided that good referral source to us on more than one occasion. I just wanted to briefly go over your mission is specifically, at least the part of the mission that your law firm operates with, is specifically to help veterans and their families. The active duty folks, again, they can come to you and hopefully get some help.
Right. Active duty can come to us. Sometimes the active duty may be over our means test. It's possible. But then again, at the same time, if they have a family and children, then they're very likely will be eligible.
Because we've talked in the past on a personal level, business to business, that they're getting messed around with substantially in a lot of areas regarding the DOD. So
Absolutely.
There's going to be an increasing need for that. And you provide the information and referral sources they need to file their claims all the way through an appeals process.
Yes.
So that's important. It's www.clsmf.org. CLSMF, that's a mouthful.org. It stands, I know what it stands for, Community Legal Services of Mid-Florida. But again, we appreciate you being here, Shelly, very much so. And Glenn, I think along with the services that you provide, it's going to be a nice adjunct to what you do.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, just the foreclosure alone gets me excited to have some help in that regard, where we don't have the specialized training necessary to be of any help, other than we refer them to the VA's hotline number for that, and I'm not so sure how effective that is.
Folks, you've been listening to American Warrior Radio right here on WMEL, the Talk to Me station, sponsored by AVET Project. Want to remind you all to come out to Titusville tonight for the light parade. It's going to be a fun time. Till next time, signing off, Glenn, as usual.
Don't forget, thank a vet.